Welcome to the Cruise Lifestyle.
Thanks, Bruce, for coming along today. It's been a couple of weeks, but there's been lots happening. The last couple of weeks, both.
Great to be back.
I wish we could say the same about cruises. But anyway, look, I noticed in today's news, I've only just sort of caught up on things that have been happening today. That Pandor have got a bit of a rescue package.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So Pandor, a big operator of sort of very much a fleet of custom-built river ships operating across Southeast Asia, because all of the navigation requirements are so different in all those different rivers, very tidal. Anyway, they've had this long-standing operation, all sorts of places, India, Myanmar, got a great big operation. Anyway, like lots of travel and tourism businesses, under a huge amount of pressure because of the pandemic. And a couple of weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, they announced that they were closing down, very sadly. Anyway, that's obviously provoked a large outpouring of support from across the industry. And today they've announced that, no, they've got enough funding to basically, they won't go to operate a winter season anyway, northern winter season anyway. So they've got enough money to sort of keep the ships in layup, and I think they're doing a bit of refurbishment until September 2022, when they are pretty confident that they can restart. And I guess they've also found that they had lots of past passengers say, look, they would pay deposits for future cruises, and that's helped them get enough cash to survive. So that's a really good news story.
What an awesome story, because it's an iconic operator, I guess, particularly through Asia and stuff.
Absolutely.
And to see them keep going.
Very small ships, very, very interesting itineraries, and, really supporting the local culture as well. And I mean, they've had this triple whammy, because as well as COVID-19 and, all the various restrictions, they also had a big operation in Myanmar where they were, it's also very humanitarian. They're supporting the local villages, who are very poor anyway, but of course there's a coup there, and they just found it impossible to operate there as well. And so when they announced the shutdown, they actually said the charitable arm would continue. They've obviously got an NGO operating in country there. But anyway, yes, commercially, if they can get up and running as they plan, obviously all of that work will still continue. So that's a really great news story.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're sort of going back. We haven't caught up with it for a couple of weeks, so we're probably going back through some of the stories from a couple of weeks ago. And there's one that Fiji sort of put out. They see immense potential in cruise down the track. So
yeah, look, I was lucky enough to be on the first flight. Fiji opened up to tourism on the 1st of December under these very strict protocols. Everyone that you come in contact with as a tourist is 100% vaccinated, which protects both you and the locals. You got to have testing when you arrive. All of the resorts have to have about 10% of their rooms put aside so that if someone does test positive, they can self-isolate. It's such a good story, despite the Omicron. So far so good. In fact, one of my son is there at the moment as well. Anyway, I went over and I managed to interview Brent Hill, who's the head of Tourism Fiji, about cruising. And yeah, they're very excited about the potential, particularly because they've got these protocols going. Now, of course, Fiji's got its own kind of homegrown cruise operation, very small ships, Blue Lagoon Cruises, which is part of South Sea Cruises, which is actually owned by the FNPF, the Fiji Provident National Fund. So basically owned by the government, but that means that all the profits help support the locals. And then, of course, Captain Cook Cruises, which the operations of Captain Cook in Australia got sold to Sealink, public company, but the family who started the company, the Hayworths, they retained the Fiji ship, and so they've got an operation there as well. So they do sort of cruises through the outer islands. But Brent Hill said that they really do see potential for cruising, and they want to, as a kind of one of the first nations to open up in a safe way. They really want to target getting their ships back, and so
cruise market, yeah.
Yeah, so let's hope that that does happen, because we know that the benefits that cruise tourism can bring to any destination like that.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll get onto that subject a bit later on. But anyway, Norwegian 2024 program release, including Norwegian Spirit to Australia.
Yeah, and so this is not unexpected, and they've actually got Spirit still planned to come to Australia real soon in early 2022. But also, pending lifting of cruise bans, et cetera, et cetera. They're holding their nerves so far. But looking further out, yes, 23, 24, the Spirit had a refurbishment planned, and I think it may have actually done it. It was a $100 million makeover, very, very big project. But of course, that was planned. I think it's happened during the pandemic, and no one's actually sailed on it. And so Australians are going to be among the first to experience this sort of revamped ship. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. And again, definitely Norwegian, one of the biggest supporters of the industry here, right through the pandemic, been really had an always-on strategy, continuing to promote and market, across their 3 brands. But yeah, this is the Norwegian brand alongside it, but Oceania and Regent Seven Seas Cruises as part of the same group. But yes, definitely committed to Australia, which is great news.
So what are they looking at the moment? I mean, we were saying early 2022. The ban at this stage is through to the 17th of February.
Yeah, and so they've still got departures scheduled for March out of Sydney with Spirit. They had this on the agenda for a long time, and it was supposed to be here now. But of course, because of the ban. But the most recent earnings update, which was a couple of weeks ago, Harry Sommer, who's the CEO of Norwegian Cruise Line, they sort of laid out this restart plan, and they aim to have all of this. I think they've got 17 ships, all back in service by March, and one of the last ones will be Spirit in sailing out of Sydney at this stage. So yeah, that's right, mate.
Malaysia is one of the ones that is still restarting or in the process of restarting. So they're cruising with Star Cruises there.
Yeah, and again, Star, being an Asian-based cruise line, they've had a successful restart out of Singapore. I think they've been sailing in Singapore for nearly a year now. They've got Hong Kong going, and I think they said 100 days in Hong Kong recently, but now Malaysia. Not unsurprising. In fact, I'm surprised it's taken so long in Malaysia, because it is a Malaysian-based parent company. They call it Genting Hong Kong, but they've got a huge operation in the Malaysian Highlands, a big casino, sort of integrated resort, which is all part of the group. And anyway, yes, so they've engaged very well with the Malaysian government and, established protocols, which obviously are working in many, many places around the world. And so, yes, Malaysia, initially, again, it's only domestic, although I think they do have a travel bubble up and running now, or very close to getting up and running with Singapore. I think both by air and land, there's a land connection through. And so I'd say that they will be accepting Singapore passengers in Malaysia and vice versa, just like in Singapore now, Australians can cruise on Dream Cruises under that vaccinated travel lane arrangement.
So just Dream and Star are pretty much the same.
Same parent company, yeah. So yes, so the company is called Genting Hong Kong. They own 3 cruise lines: Star Cruises, which they've had for a long time, and then Dream Cruises, which is sort of new builds and a new sort of brand, initially sort of targeting the Chinese market, but quite a wide demographic, and some of the biggest ships that in the world they're building. And then they also own Crystal Cruises. So lots of keen interest in that restart. Yeah,
well, they've certainly been one of the first to really go. Like, I mean, I guess the ports they operate and stuff, but they've been one of the cruises that, one of the cruise lines that have sort of been there right from the start to get back up and running. So
yeah, I think they've been pretty strategic in picking destinations where cruise is very important, and like Singapore. Singapore needs tourism. You've got good governmental controls, very strict protocols, of course, in Singapore. And I suppose that they're using that as something that an example of how they can show these other jurisdictions that it can be done safely, and which they've been able to demonstrate very clearly. Yeah,
it's awesome. Changing tack, Hurtigruten, they're expanding their expeditions. They're looking at West Africa and South America.
Yeah, so Hurtigruten, it's a really interesting cruise line. Obviously, its background has been this coastal route in Norway, and really is sort of almost very much government-backed or government subsidised. It's a public service, that route. A couple of years ago, competition theory, came to the fore in Norway, and they decided to open up that operation to competition. And so there's another operator coming on to the coastal route. At the same time, Hurtigruten decided, well, clearly the government wants to diversify things, so we're going to have to find other markets. And so they doubled down on expedition. And so they've got an ever expanding expedition fleet. They are still doing the coastal route up and down the coast of Norway, which is a fantastic experience.
It's a bucket list for me, for sure.
Yeah, it's really a great thing. But they also have started this new build program. So the ones that go up and down the coast they're a real hybrid. They're delivering cars, they're delivering mail. You've got people traveling between ports, to go to visit grandma, but then they've also got cruise passengers.
Yeah, it's almost like a Spirit of Tasmania type operation.
Yeah, that's right. Some people sleep in, chairs on the deck, or, it's too cold on the deck most of the time, but in the lounge, they've got these big chairs that people will just nap on. But then they've also got cabins and a full, fantastic restaurant, short excursions. So it's a real hybrid. Anyway, yes, they've expanded to these expedition ships. And my wife and I were lucky enough to go on one of the first voyages of the Roald Amundsen, where we went way, really to the North Pole in 2019 before COVID. And so they've got more and more of these ships coming. They're very keen on their environmental credentials. So these ships are hybrid, light fuel oil. They've got lots of batteries. They can cruise under battery power, etc. Which is a bit of a gimmick. You still need oil, unfortunately, to operate a cruise ship. But as the fleet expands, of course, they've got to find new destinations. And so, yes, back to your initial point, yes, West Africa, all sorts of places that will be really, really interesting in terms of experiencing that product. And the ships are beautiful, very comfortable. These ones are dedicated to cruising. I think they've got about 680 passengers. Lots of you've got kayaks, you've got zodiacs, all sorts of short excursion experiences. Yep. But on board, very comfortable. A lot of the citizen science sort of stuff. There's labs with microscopes and lots of lectures. Multilingual. They definitely target. On my cruise, we had English, French, German, and Chinese. Groups. But restaurants, excellent, really, really lovely. And yes, so really nice. And so to be able to see places like West Africa or, the Russian Far East on a ship like that, it's just going to be magical.
And they're also, I noticed one of the other things we're going to talk about before, they're also expanding into Galapagos.
Galapagos, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So again, Galapagos, a highly regulated environment, and it's owned by Ecuador. So it's quite difficult to enter the cruise operations there. You can only use small ships, and you've got to have a certain number of basically government employees from Ecuador come on board who are naturalists, etc. They do the interpretation, but they also make sure that the destination is not overwhelmed, because it's one of these incredibly pristine, unique ecosystems. And so again, Hurtigruten, what these cruise lines want to do is get people on board, experience the product, and then of course they want to do repeats, and so they want to experience a new destination next time. And so Galapagos, being done the Hurtigruten way will be really, really interesting. Right.
Yeah, well, it's another bucket list.
Yeah, really part of their DNA.
Yeah, nice. Costa have delivered had a new flagship delivered.
Yeah, and it's a big ship. I saw I think it's 2,600 cabins. So 5,200 lower berths. That's an Oasis class equivalent from Carnival Corporation. So Costa obviously focusing always on the Italian market, but then they did a big expansion into China as sort of an international brand. But yeah, this is it's quite a big ship. And so interesting that they are really, really hoping that it's a lot of berths to fill. I think it's called Costa Toscana, which is a bit of
it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
not if you're good at Italian.
Look, there's a few new builds going on at the moment. Yeah. I mean, MSC have double or celebrates a double milestone for their new builds.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, interestingly, I think that the MSC, two of them, and also this Costa, Toscana, they're all LNG powered. So they're all this new generation of very large ship, but operating on LNG rather than oil. And so all of the cruise lines really trying to push this environmental, credentials. These are assets that have a long life, 30 or 40 years, probably even longer. And so they're definitely catching the wave of the new consumer, the younger demographic, where these environmental things are very important. And, it's really great to see that they are, I guess, walking the talk, investing, making these big decisions, because the problem with LNG is that because it's not widely used, you kind of can't go, if you've got an LNG ship, you can't go everywhere in the world because you can't refuel. We'll never see, well, at the moment, you wouldn't see an LNG ship in Australia because there's no refueling capability for LNG ships. So it's a big investment, but if no one does it, there'll never be one down here. Whereas, I guess if there's a business case for it, eventually it will happen, but you got to have the ships first. So LNG, so these ships will cruise in places where they do have the facilities, like the Caribbean, Mediterranean, North Sea, these places where there is a high density of cruise shipping. And yes, really great to see. And, MSC, again, a cruise line that is investing like crazy despite the pandemic. It's the number of new builds that they have, and they're these gigantic ships. Clearly, got a very clear vision of their business plan, and, they're executing it in earnest.
Well, I mean, if you think how big MSC is, I mean, most people don't realise that, the proportion of cargo ships to cruise ships that they have. I mean, cargo ships outweighs it probably 95% to 5%, really, isn't it? It's just a massive, massive company.
Totally insane. Yeah, crazy.
Speaking of new builds, I mean, Enchanted Princess had their naming ceremony last week, or? Yeah,
they did. And, in true 2020 style, or 2021 style, it was live streamed, but they made quite an event of it. In fact, the local Carnival team it was timed. I think it was done from Miami, but they had a big event for media and for their trade partners, travel agents and things in Sydney to enjoy that event. And so, that's quite a milestone. And again, good to see cruise lines investing and investing in the Australian market, even though, we seem to be so anti the sector at the moment.
Cunard have announced a food and wine cruise for 2023.
Yeah, this is a really interesting example of destination immersion, I suppose. So taking passengers on a journey, on a voyage, obviously, but also allowing them to experience local cuisine and, food and wine, from local producers. And again, I guess an example of how it's not all about the onboard experience for many of these cruise lines, and the support that they're giving to local providers in each market. So that's going to make a huge difference. And also, where you've got international guests on board, you're exposing them to, it's Australian tourism. You're exposing them to products that the best of the best, rather than just the closed environment of the cruise ship, where obviously you can't have everything at your fingertips. You can, going off the ship and doing these excursions and experiencing stuff, you can just have a great experience of the boutique winery or whatever, make a huge difference to those people.
Look, I mean, there's so much opportunity, I guess, for international guests to experience, even for Australians, really. I mean, there's a lot about our own country we don't see, those little nooks and crannies that you don't necessarily see off the beaten path.
Absolutely. Yep.
So cruise lines definitely have an opportunity for a niche. To develop niche things around that. You look at I guess ports like Eden that have developed definitely pre-pandemic, and they've really gone in all guns blazing. I mean, they've had a bit of investment from New South Wales to get the ports up and running, but Jesus, it's a great destination. Yeah.
Amazing.
Overseas, Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line, which most of us probably wouldn't know anything about, but they've become Margaritaville at Sea.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting move, particularly interesting because Margaritaville is a it's like a restaurant line chain run by a guy called Jimmy Buffett, or who's a singer, songwriter, parlayed his success into this hospitality brand, which is actually also available on some Norwegian ships. So Norwegian Cruise Line, they've got Margaritaville, themed restaurants on board. I mean, clearly they've gone well, and clearly there's no sort of non-compete, I assume, because this whole cruise line is now going to offer that aspirational experience. Obviously suits a certain demographic. All they do is sit back and, I guess, sip on margaritas and have some nachos, and I don't know.
Sounds very cocktail, doesn't it?
It does indeed. Yes. Unashamedly, it is about the onboard experience, I'm sure. I don't imagine that the shore excursions will be a key feature, unless they're going to a tequila plantation or something like that. But
yeah. Take the photos, because you might not remember it otherwise. Crystal have come out with a promotion, a zero single supplement on cabins, which is great for single travelers.
Yeah, look, this is the sort of thing that you do see sometimes on departures that are a little bit soft, and I think that Crystal is. When we talked about Genting Hong Kong before, so the parent company still in a bit of strife, you'd have to say, in terms of COVID-19. They really need to get the revenues up and going, and there's been a lot of pushback, particularly from the travel industry, about Crystal being among the worst in terms of providing refunds through COVID. And so, yes, they're doing anything they can to stimulate the market, and this no single supplement is a big deal, especially on a cruise line like that. It's quite interesting, the whole single supplement. Often you pay, obviously all the fares are geared to double occupancy because you've got two people traveling together. And so in theory, a single cabin, should cost twice as much if you only got one person in there. And so waiving this, it could be a discount of as much as 50%. But the counterpoint to this is that on some cruise lines where they rely a lot on onboard revenue, they'll actually charge more than double the price for a single person, because when you've got two people in a cabin, they're a bit more relaxed. They're spending more on gambling and drinks and all that sort of thing, whereas a person on their own perhaps doesn't. And so they've got to make their money somehow. So yes, no single supplement is a big deal.
Yeah, look, I think it's a way to experience Crystal.
Yeah.
So, it's good value.
Yeah.
Excellent value. Now, P&O UK, there's a story came out the other week that they're pumping up the fund. You're putting water parks on and all that sort of stuff, which is quite interesting because some of their ships have been designated as adults only.
Only, yeah.
Sort of cruises. So it's quite a sort of separation between or within the one brand, really, isn't it?
It is. And, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but the Stura Mermel, who has for a long time been the head of P&O Australia, that's where he's gone, P&O UK. He's just relocated to the UK to head up all the brands there, including P&O, which, yes, as you say, it's been traditionally a very, somewhat straight-laced, not like Cunard, not sort of black tie, but definitely adults only, focusing on that, kind of 50-plus market. But I would say that Stura, he's no fool, and he's seen how well the P&O Australia product has worked, and particularly in broadening the demographic. The UK is an interesting market, particularly because they had a very early restart of cruising. In fact, they were really one of the first English-speaking markets to have to allow a restart, and that meant that the cruise lines really focused on it, and every cruise line in the world, there were at some stage, I think there were like 20 restarts, all happening only for UK passengers. So UK passengers have been exposed to a huge variety of cruises that normally, homeporting out of the UK, that normally they wouldn't have been so easy for them to get on. And so, yes, look, you've got to think that there has been some research that's gone into this, yes, targeting that, trend of people, family holidays, post-COVID, people do want a holiday close to home. The traditional English holiday of, sort of go and fly and flop to the Canary Islands or south of France or whatever may not be as popular post-COVID. And so I think that they're looking at that opportunity and thinking they can capitalise on it.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, years ago, they did the division where they did the Ocean Village type thing, which didn't really work. And we ended up with a couple of their ships here. So, it's interesting. Ocean Village, I've seen some old advertising they had on that. It was, I wasn't sure what they're quite targeting, but it'll be interesting to see how that progresses because P&O UK, as we said, and it's only really been in the last 3 or 4 years that they've said, okay, we're going to go adults only on some of our ships.
Yes,
so it's interesting to see that sort of come back. And putting the water slides on and things like that. An interesting product to watch, I think.
Yeah.
There is a story that long haul aerophobia, which is a bit of a thing. So they're saying, or there's been a study saying that possibly people are going to be afraid of long haul flying, and so a lot of holidays will be closer to home and things like that.
Yeah. Look, there's studies and there's studies. When we published this story, we did get a bit of interest from across the industry about, where did it actually come from? I think it was a Queensland university, it was some education institution in Queensland that did it. And people were very interested to know who did they interview, who did they survey, where did the ideas come from? And I think that, like all things, it's all about demographics. Yes, of course, at the moment, there are people who can't wait to get on a cruise, who can't wait to get on a plane. I'm one of them, ready to go. But there are others who will never, think they will never travel again. And so for the cruise industry, like every industry, it's all about, you've got to accept that as a reality. You can't, it's not up to us to change that perception. What's up to us is to provide appealing products that suit the ones who are going to travel. And so, of course, in a macro world, a fear of long haul flying will have an impact. But I think also on the other side of that, you've got an awful lot of people who they might be afraid of it, but they're going to travel long haul because they're going to see grandma back in Greece or England or America.
That's it. Yep.
And having just done this quick trip to Fiji myself, I was intrigued to see how it would, how complex it was. It's pretty easy. So once you've got your ducks in a row, for Fiji, for example, you've got to have a PCR test before you go, which you get at the airport. That's the best place. You've got to have, as you rock up, you have to present your proof that you've got accommodation with a Fiji certified place and a transfer and a vaccination certificate. It's not much different. It's not much more than just presenting your passport and your itinerary or your visa.
Well, I mean, like you said, it's just lining up your ducks and knowing what the procedures are, what you've got to do. And I can imagine cruising's going to be like that when it does come back here.
Absolutely. And it really didn't change the experience much at all.
No.
You wore a mask on board on the plane, but not when you were eating. And again, coming back, I was a little bit nervous because you have to, at the moment, you've got to have a test to come back to Australia, but that was done in the resort. It was so easy. And I guarantee the same will apply for cruising. They'll facilitate everything because, of course, they're good at these logistics and, really want things to be organised well. So,
yeah. All right, let's get on to the elephant in the room. It was a bit of a shock to a lot of people that the government turned around and extended the borders by a couple of months, at least at this point. And there's been a lot of expression from the industry of shock and all that sort of things. Because leading up to it, it was quite positive that we want cruising by Christmas and things like that. But they've turned around and gone the other way. So.
Yeah, I mean, the big frustration is that, I think what's behind this decision to go the other way is that the almighty health bureaucrats would say, well, we don't have enough, we haven't looked at it enough, we haven't, and so we're going to take the cautious option.
Well, they have had
why haven't they looked at enough? They've had such an opportunity and they just, I think it's just been in the too hard basket. And, look, I think Greg Hunt, the health minister, is very embarrassed at having to do this, but again, he's hiding behind the omniscient, chief health officer and this and that. He, interestingly, Greg Hunt has also resigned, said he's not going to contest the next election. So he's not so concerned about his own popularity, I think. Dan Tehan, the tourism minister, he's apparently very supportive and understands the issues, but he's not in the inner sanctum of there's really four of them who are making all the decisions: the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, Simon Birmingham, the Finance Minister, and Greg Hunt. And so, I don't know, cruising just doesn't seem to be able to, catch a break.
I mean, the industry has made so many, I guess, presentations and meetings and everything else.
Yeah.
And it just seems to fall on deaf ears. It's just...
Well, and look, the crazy thing is that, this week we've seen a whole lot of industry colleagues off in Miami or Singapore or whatever, doing a cruise, experiencing the product, flying home. How can that be less safe? How can that be less safe than more safe? So how can that be more safe than a local homegrown cruise where, the Australian authorities are in control of things? It's mind-boggling. And I think Greg Hunt's embarrassment also in the announcement was reflected. He said, we'll review, we're extending the ban for 2 months, but we'll review on a monthly basis, which is sort of this shock to the industry. Well, when's the first month end? It's between the 17th of December and the 17th of January.
Yeah, when everybody's got it.
Yeah. What government official isn't at their beach house, because they've all been paid through COVID, they can afford to go on holidays. It's just so annoying and frustrating. It's just... And
on the other hand, I notice there's a few tens of millions of dollars being thrown again at the airlines to... So, I mean, as a result, P&O and Carnival have said we're out till April.
Yeah. I mean, again, they're doing, this was a 3-week extension this time. It's clearly, how I can't understand. It's got to be unconscionable for the government to extend it any more, but that's what we thought this time as well. So, I really, the mind boggles.
I'm surprised.
And it is just this industry that employs 18,000 people like you and me, who are just being continually hung out to dry and not given any path forward. It's so frustrating.
Well, I mean, there's been a bit of media coverage from different angles. There was a story in the Australian last week, which had a little bit of me in there as well. They sort of rang me up. And Daily Telegraph has had thing. Luke Mangan's been
I saw that.
Having his say and stuff. So there's a lot of frustration.
Yeah,
a lot of frustration out there, and it's what do you do?
Yeah,
what do you do?
I know.
Anyway.
One foot in front of the other. Remember that you have a roof over your head and food.
That's it. But you think of the amount of people that are affected.
Yeah,
not just crews, but you're talking your suppliers, your farmer, like everything.
Totally.
The tour operators, tour guides.
A million times, yeah. It's just biggest belief.
And as far as I know, they don't take AdBlue, so that's a good thing. So we could. I don't know.
Right.
Princess, on the other side of things, Princess has been going gangbusters, apparently with reservations and things. Like people are booking ahead.
Oh, absolutely. So this was I think they released their world cruise out of Australia, sold out in a matter of hours, pretty much thanks to the efforts of the various travel agency groups, trade partners who, it's always a big thing for them. It's an absolutely aspirational thing to want to do a world cruise. But for most cruise lines, you've got to board in Miami or Fort Lauderdale or, somewhere other than Australia. So the unique thing about this itinerary is that it's Sydney to Sydney, but, visiting, traveling around the world. And yes, very popular. So there is that demand. Clearly, obviously people in government don't like cruising, but plenty of passengers do, and they're booking in droves. So
yeah,
it's great.
and we've been saying that for the last 2 or 3 months. Like, someone releases a 2023 or 2024 thing, and it's just sold out within hours or days at the most. So yeah, a lot of pent up demand. Now, there was a story, I think it was from Ponant, the action to try and save the Kimberley season. So that's at risk at the moment as well.
Yeah, well, this was a subplot to, so alongside the overall cruise ban, you've got Mark McGowan, the chairman of the Democratic People's Republic of Western Australia. I think it's them and North Korea are about the most isolated jurisdictions in the world. He's just closed the border to Tasmania. And so I think that Ponant is trying to lead the charge to say, for heaven's sake, we've already lost 2 years of Kimberley cruising. It's not just about, foreign cruise companies being able to operate.
There's a lot of locals that
and Indigenous communities, a whole lot of Indigenous communities. It's millions of dollars of income for those people as well that they've missed out on for 2 years now. And I just, I think that Ponant can see, they don't dare to think it. No one dares to think it. But could there be a third year where McGowan doesn't allow cruising? It seems impossible, but the season, usually starts in, late April. Well, it's only 6 months away.
Not even.
And, they're only opening up on the 5th of February. Surely that's got to include a cruise restart as part of the components in there. But
well, you talk of, we're getting off cruise at the moment. There's stories out at the moment about the amount of people that are cancelling just normal holidays within Australia now because they're not sure whether it's even going to go ahead, and they're scared of borders closing back again and things like that. So,
I've got to be honest, we did consider, partly for personal reasons, cancelling our trip to Fiji. Anyway, we went ahead and we're very glad that we did. But yes, I think that's just the environment at the moment. People don't want to get stuck. They don't want to have some funny rule change that means that all of a sudden, they can't get back for XYZ, the wedding, the birthday, the, family event, the other holiday. Look, Australia, we're 92%, I think, certainly in New South Wales, nearly 95% are double vaccinated. I've just had my third, my booster shot. Vaccination is the way out of this, not isolation. And they are saying, everything's been Omicron. Well, let's just see in a couple of weeks what happens to hospitalisation. Touch wood, so far, the indications are good. Testing rates in New South Wales are incredibly high. And yes, they're finding lots of infection, but hospitalisation rates are not rising at all. And in fact, the indications so far are quite good. In fact, right through the pandemic, the expectations from the epidemiologists that have kept us in, constrained so much have never eventuated. The hospital systems have not been overwhelmed. At the worst predictions have not been achieved.
Yeah, look, we've certainly survived a lot better than other countries.
It's hard when you see what's happening in Europe at the moment and return to lockdown, but most of those countries, they're only 60% vaccinated. And it's winter, it's very cold, etc., etc. Look, at the moment in Australia, we're heading into summer. It's not flu season. We need to press the advantage that we have achieved and continue to open up and learn to live with this thing.
Yeah. It's certainly interesting times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just changing tack completely. Fred Olsen have got a Corinth Canal sailing. Now, if people that don't know the Corinth Canal, it's amazing.
Yeah, and
experience.
It's not very wide. Yeah.
No, it's not very wide. The ship they're looking at using, I think, is 25 metres, and the narrowest point on the canal is 23 or something.
Yeah.
So not much leeway.
it's going to be very tight. I think I read it. I think there's 80 feet. So, yes, very, very tricky, but fascinating. Towering cliffs on each side, an amazing transit. And good on them. This is the sort of thing that people are after. It's similar. I don't think we've had a chance to talk about Norwegian is home porting out of Panama, and you'd think, well, why? But of course, the Panama Canal, again, a bucket list. I'd love to see the Panama Canal. And so they're doing this season, I think it's 12 departures up and down the Panama Canal. Fantastic.
Yeah, awesome.
And so of course, it'll be mostly, I assume, US passengers rather than home porting, people based in Panama. I don't think the population is that big, but an ideal opportunity, whereas usually you only get to experience the Panama Canal on one of those repositionings or a world cruise or something like that. So, and yes,
surprised no one's thought of it beforehand, really.
Yeah,
I mean, it's great.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is it's all about economics. It's expensive to transit the Panama Canal. You pay a lot for it, but I think also, I suspect Norwegians, probably got a prepayment. They probably, because they haven't transited nearly as many times as they had expected to over the last couple of years, and so good way to use those credits up. And so, long may it rain. It's great opportunity.
Yeah. Another bucket list. Put me down for that one as well.
Yeah.
Carnival Radiance is a new one that Carnival have christened, and the godmother is Shaq O'Neill's.
Hey, America, meet my mom, Lucille. Hello, mother. Say hello to America. She says hi. Anyway, I got big news for you, Mom. Huh? No, I'm not unretiring. That's crazy. Got too good of a gig here at Carnival. The news is that you're the new godmother of the Carnival Radiance. That's a great honor. She says, wow. Thanks, Carnival. She says, thank you, Carnival. Love you too, Mommy. Oh, yeah, macaroni and cheese and cornbread. All right, I'm on my way now.
That's right, Lucille O'Neill. So, very alliterative, assonant name. And yes, it's interesting. Look, I love the rhetoric around this. She's the godmother. There's a very close relationship because Shaq is sort of the celebrity ambassador of the cruise line, appears in all their ads. He's got the family have a restaurant chain on board. And so they pitch it that Lucille is a, philanthropist and, public speaker and blah, blah, blah. I think truly, her true claim to fame is that she gave birth to this fantastic basketball player. But yes, good on them. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, you need a godmother. And she's definitely pushing home that close association, which is definitely obviously working for Carnival.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to say. I mean, that's another new build that's been launched and things. So there are things happening, but
definitely
just not here. Scenic Eclipse got a 23-24 Antarctic season, but they've released it early.
Yes. So Scenic again. Planning to restart in Antarctica very soon. I think the 8th of January or something like that for this season. And they might get some Aussies on it now that we're allowed to travel, although it is quite difficult to get to South America. There's no direct flights. You've got to fly via the US. But yes, so launching, but because of the interest in that, they've also launched 23-24. With Scenic Eclipse. And so getting their ducks in a row, getting people on board. And interestingly, they're adopting what a lot of the cruise lines operating to Antarctica now are doing, which is fly cruise. So you can do one way across the Drake Passage or both ways, flying in one direction. So basically you can experience more of Antarctica rather than the Drake Passage. It takes 3 or 4 days, depending on the weather, to transit. And so less time doing that, less days at sea, essentially, more days where you can experience the destination on those fantastic Scenic Eclipse products, which includes, a couple of helicopters on board, a submarine.
Yeah, look, it's an awesome piece of hardware, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
amazing. So look, good luck to them, and I hope it really sells well for them.
Yeah, well, that pretty much wraps it up for today. Thanks for your time once again. I know it's been a hairy couple of weeks with things going on and announcements and everything else. So thanks for your time in coming on board today and having a chat.
No problem.
This will probably be our last one for the year, I guess. I think next week's probably let's just
think
take
so.
a break. So
Yeah. Yep.
we'll meet
Holiday
again,
time. Yeah.
meet again early next year and chat about what's been happening over Christmas.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
All right, perfect.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you. Thanks, Bruce. See you later.
Cheers. See ya.